Alright, so let's be clear up front here. This isn't a list of the obvious action RPGs. There's no Witchers, no Xenoblades, nothing sitting at the top of the eShop charts. We're going for the deeper cuts, the underplayed, the overlooked, the ones you potentially scrolled right past. Now yes, I will admit, a few of these might not be pure hidden gems. You could argue they're known, and yes, fair point. But I've got my reasons for including each one, and I'll explain as we go. Also, I'm not including Souls-likes here. They've got their own video, which I've linked in the pinned comment. Then finally, if you are into games that don't get enough love on Switch, hit subscribe. I cover this constantly, and it helps the channel a huge amount. Alright, now let's get into 15 not so obvious action RPGs. Eternights opens with a full-on apocalypse. There's a mysterious infection that's turning most of humanity into monsters. Cities are collapsing overnight, and you are, suddenly, one of the few people immune. You're thrown into a survival scenario alongside a group of strangers, each with their own baggage, secrets, and regrets. Now it's a hybrid, part dungeon crawler action RPG, part time management sim. You'll basically spend your days fighting through real-time combat encounters with dodging, parrying, and flashing combos. Then you'll spend your nights deciding how to build relationships, level up key abilities, and prep for the next phase of the world falling apart. Now there is dating, it was advertised as a big focus, but I want to say it's entirely optional. You can pursue romantic routes, or you can simply build friendships, and both paths, they feed into the combat system. Now I played this on both PlayStation and Switch, and while some parts feel indie with the animation and pacing, I genuinely got pulled into the story. The characters stuck with me, and it hits more emotional beats than you'd expect. It also runs really nicely on Switch, so yeah, if you want something stylish, sincere, and just a little weird, this one's worth checking out. God Eater 3 is a Bandai Namco title, and I know that alone might make it sound too mainstream for a hidden gem, but this one's been completely overshadowed by Monster Hunter, and it's a real shame because it absolutely holds its own. Now, it takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where you join an elite squad using massive living weapons called God Arcs to hunt down these creatures known as Aragami. Now, the combat is real-time, it's fast, it's relentless. You're basically chaining aerial combos, switching weapon forms mid-fight, unleashing powerful burst attacks, and it all feels incredibly satisfying. Now, compared to Monster Hunter, it's way more anime-styled. It's also, though, way more aggressive, and honestly, it's also a little bit more accessible, in my opinion, for solo players. On Switch then, it holds up surprisingly well. The visuals, they're not cutting edge, but the performance is stable, the gameplay loop is addictive, and if you like big stylish boss fights, cool weapons and fast-paced action, God Eater 3 comes highly recommended. Transistor is one of those games that's easy to overlook if you've only heard it described as artsy or indie, but under all the style is a really clever and surprisingly intense action RPG. Now you play as Red, a singer in a futuristic city who's lost her voice and is being hunted by a mysterious force. Now early on, you pick up this massive talking sword. Yes, you heard that right, talking sword. It's called the Transistor, and the rest of the game is you basically trying to figure out what happened, who's behind it, and why you were targeted. Now combat here blends real-time movement with a pause and plan system that lets you line up attacks, reposition, then watch it all unfold in a flash. You'll unlock new abilities that can be used actively or combined with others. That basically creates dozens of build options, and yeah, it's an incredibly tactical and flexible experience. Now the writing then is minimal but emotional, the soundtrack is incredible, and even though it's from the same team that made Hades, this one never quite got the spotlight. It also runs perfectly on Switch and fits handheld play beautifully. As Libra Revision is one of the most surprising games I've played on Switch. Now at first glance it looks like a simple 2D action RPG with pixel art, but give it a few hours and it turns into something massive, strange, and genuinely impressive. Now you play as a young man who's lost everything, his village, his childhood, even his sense of time. And now we set out with a talking crow to survive in a twisted world full of monsters, demons, and impossible gods. Basically, it starts grounded, but then it spirals into timelines, reincarnation, and cosmic war. It is wild stuff. The real-time combat then starts simple as well, with jump, slash, dodge, but gradually it opens up into this real, deep system of magic, ranged attacks, and gear customization. You also unlock passive skills, alternate weapon types, and even full-on class options. So yeah, there is way more going on here than it first lets on. Phoenotopia Awakening is a game I'm a massive fan of. It's a 2D action RPG that feels like a blend of Zelda 2, Cave Story, and even a touch of like classic Metroid, but it's got its own tone, charm, and heart. Now you play as Gale, a young girl from a quiet village who's suddenly caught up in something much bigger. Basically, enemies, we'll call them, arrive, adults vanish, and it's up to you to explore this massive interconnected world. You want to uncover the truth and basically survive long enough to do something about it. Now, I will be honest, when it first launched, the difficulty here was brutal. It was bloody near impossible at points, especially in the opening hours. But the developers listened to feedback and they patched that curve. Now it's spot on, it is still challenging, but it's totally fair. The combat then is real deliberate. You've got to be strategic in what you are doing. There's this mix of melee, ranged weapons, and gear upgrades. There's also the platforming, puzzles, tons of hidden secrets, and the soundtrack is just beautiful. One of my favorites on the Switch, without a doubt. So yeah, this one, a very like heartfelt adventure that in my opinion, doesn't get enough love. Crosscode is one of the smartest action RPGs on Switch, but it doesn't maybe look like it at first. You know, the pixel art's gorgeous, the combat is fast, but it's also very easy to assume it's just another retro throwback, and it's absolutely not. Now you play as Leah, a mute character trapped in a futuristic MMO world. She can't speak, can't remember how she got there, and you spend the game uncovering a surprisingly emotional story about identity, memory, and control. The real-time combat here is incredibly responsive. You're juggling ranged attacks, melee combos, dodging, eventually elemental powers. These all change how you play. But what I really love is how your abilities aren't just for combat. They're used in puzzles as well, and clever ones. It's woven right into the world design. This one as well, worth knowing, it started life as a browser game. It was developed by a tiny team over years, and the end result is something special. So yeah, it's easy to kind of miss, but once it clicks, Crosscode is, yeah, absolutely incredible. Ononaki is set in a world where reincarnation is real and the people who can't let go of the dead risk trapping their souls forever. It's a strange story, this one, really good though. So you play as a watcher, someone who helps spirits move on by literally fighting the regrets holding them back. The story, it dives into grief, memory, and moral grey areas without wallowing in misery. I really appreciate that. Instead of traditional weapons, then you bond with demons that each give you a completely different fighting style. Swords, scythes, fists, and more. You can switch between them in real time, and they all level up and evolve as you progress. The combat starts simple, but it builds into something genuinely satisfying as systems unlock. And this game, it's worth knowing it's from Tokyo RPG Factory. That's the same team behind the incredible I Am Setsuna and Lost Sphere. Now, it was published by Square Enix, but to me, it just slipped under the radar, and the concept is so unique, and the execution, just solid. It also runs really well on Switch. The Legend of Nayuta Boundless Trails is part of the long-running Incredible Trails series, but it's nothing like the rest. Originally released on PSP in Japan back in 2012, this Switch version marked its first official launch in the West. Now sadly, to me at least, it kind of came and went without much fanfare, which is a shame because it's one of the most approachable and just flat-out fun games in the franchise. It ditches the turn-based combat and massive political plot lines, and instead gives you a fast-paced, real-time action RPG with platforming, tight level design, and a self-contained story. Now you'll play as Nayuta, a curious kid who dreams of exploring beyond his island. Well, that is until a mysterious girl falls from the sky and drags him into a cross-world adventure full of magic, danger, and shifting seasons. It's heartfelt, it's sharp, and it's way more focused than the usual, Trails epic. The combat then is really fun, with seasonal magic that basically changes how you fight, and gear upgrades that steadily expand your options. With this one as well, I will say, look, if you've wanted to get into Trails without committing to a 200-hour saga, it's a brilliant standalone entry that's just way too easy to overlook. Shining Resonance Refrain is a weird one. It's a remaster of a Japan-only PS3 game, part of Sega's Shining series, and it definitely didn't blow people away when it came west. The reviews, they were mixed, and yes, look, the dungeons are repetitive, the pacing's definitely uneven, and the story is just pure anime melodrama. But for all of that, I still really enjoyed it. Now you play as Yuma, a boy who can transform into a dragon, caught between kingdoms that all want a piece of that power. It's packed with tropey characters, the knight, the quiet one, but they're actually genuinely likeable, and the interactions between them, they add personality. The standout mechanic though with this is the bat system. It's a musical buff setup where certain characters perform songs mid-battle to boost the party. It's flashy, it fits the world, it adds a nice layer of strategy without slowing things down. The combat then as well, great fun. There's even some light relationship building between missions, and the whole thing just has this kind of breezy comfort RPG vibe that really worked for me. So yeah, with this one I'd say it's not essential, but it's easy to enjoy, and on Switch, it runs great. Dusk Diver is set in a real-world Taipei district that rarely shows up in games, a busy shopping and nightlife area, reimagined with a supernatural twist. Basically, portals to another dimension start tearing through the streets, monsters slip in, and yeah, you end up fighting alongside guardian spirits to keep the chaos contained. Now you'll be playing as Yumo, a high school student suddenly thrown into this otherworldly mess. The setup is quick, the tone is light without being too shallow, and it keeps things moving with a decent click. Combat though is really flashy and combo driven. You can juggle enemies, call in assist attacks, and build up new abilities as you go. Again, kind of like the story, not super deep, but it has that satisfying beat 'em up rhythm that just clicks. Now admittedly, I will say the environments and the visual design generally gets repetitive. I called that out in my review, which you'll find linked in the pinned comment. But the unique setting and overall style, it ends up carrying it through. It also runs well on the Switch, and if you can grab it on sale, it's definitely worth your time. Tokyo Xanadu is one of my personal favourites, and somehow it still feels like barely anyone talks about it. Now, it originally launched back on Vita, got an expanded version on PS4, and finally made its way to Switch, with almost no noise. And that is wild, because this is a great game. It's made by Falcom, same team behind Ease and Trails, but it's set in modern day Tokyo, where your main character stumbles into an alternate dimension full of shadow creatures and ends up fighting them after school. So yes, there's a bit of Persona energy with light sim like social elements, but the heart of it is fast-paced dungeon crawling, and the combat here flows really well. You can basically switch between party members on the fly, each with their own elemental style, different weapon types, and yeah, just a great rhythm to the fights. Think quick dodges, clean combos, and plenty of character-specific moves to unlock. It's not the flashiest game, visually transparently, but it runs well on the Switch, and the pacing here is spot on. So if you've ever loved Ease or Trails or just want a solid blend of like modern setting and fantasy action, I think this one deserves way more attention than it's ever gotten. Drover, Forsaken Kin throws you into a world that feels broken from the start. Ancient spirits and warring factions are basically fighting for control, and you, a nameless outsider, end up caught in the middle. There's no hand-holding, no big exposition dumps. You survive, explore, and yeah, figure things out for yourself. The tone is dark and grounded, drawing from Celtic mythology rather than typical fantasy tropes. The pixel art then nails this atmosphere with really detailed environments that feel both mystical but incredibly dangerous. The combat then uses a flow-based system built around combos and weapon variety, and every encounter here is risky, especially early on when you're underpowered. There's also crafting, stat progression, and faction choices that actually shape how that story plays out. What makes Drover stand out though is how it trusts you to piece things together. So look, if you enjoyed the exploration and slow burn storytelling of something like Gothic or classic CRPGs, this captures that same feeling of discovery and consequence. And most surprisingly maybe as well, the Switch port here holds up really well. I think this one is a must play. Ys 9 Monstrum Nox might seem like an odd choice for a hidden gem discussion since Ys is a massive series, but this entry got skipped by a lot of Switch players because of how rough it ran on the original hardware. The frame rate was all over the place at launch, still is in fact, and that's especially true during massive boss fights, of which there's plenty, or crowded encounters. But on the Switch 2, been testing it this week, it's night and day. It finally feels like the game it was meant to be. Now the game itself then is a shift for the series as well. You're not sailing across continents like in Ys 8, instead you're locked inside a city under constant surveillance and you're forced into the role of a monstrum with supernatural powers. Now each character here you recruit brings a new traversal skill, like wall running or gliding. It opens up the world in creative ways and gives exploration real momentum. The combat then, incredibly fast-paced. It's built around switching characters on the fly, the chain abilities and dodge attacks. It is responsive, it's stylish, and yeah, there's just enough depth here as well to keep it, engaging throughout the entire runtime. The story then leaning into mystery and conspiracy, slowly revealing what's going on beneath the surface of this city. It's weird in places, it's a little slow to start, but by the end, it works. And yeah, it actually runs now really well again on Switch 2. It finally clicks, so I think this one is worth a second look. Raido Remastered drops you into 1930s Japan, where you're not just any high schooler, you're Raido, a devil summoner working undercover as a detective. When a routine case spirals into a tangled mess of disappearances, cults and experimental tech, you're suddenly knee-deep in a conspiracy that threatens the entire capital. It's part occult mystery, part supernatural noir. You're negotiating with demons, solving cases, and uncovering secrets, all while keeping the public blissfully unaware of what's lurking in, the shadows. The combat then, it's not turn-based, it's real-time, and that's what makes it stand out from most of the Shin Megami Tensei titles. This is actually a spin-off. But here you'll be dodging, attacking, and giving commands to your demons in the heat of battle, and once it clicks, it's actually got a really satisfying rhythm. It even actually as well, worth noting, got a dedicated Switch 2 build. On the original Switch, you'll see some frame drops, but on Switch 2, it's completely smooth, and on both systems, honestly, it looks fantastic. Megaton Musashi is full-on Saturday morning anime chaos in the best possible way. Earth spinning faded, most of humanity wiped out, and the survivors live in shielded cities with really no memory of what happened. Now you are part of a secret squad piloting giant mechs to fight back, and the drama only ramps up from there. Now this game, it's from Level 5, so that's the studio behind Ni no Kuni, Yokai Watch, and Professor Layton. And this is one of their most overlooked, but also ambitious and unhinged projects yet. It kind of plays like a mashup of Super Robot Wars and classic brawlers, but in real time. You'll pick your mech, customize its loadout, then dive into fast-paced missions juggling aerial combos, charged attacks, weapons, and massive finishers. It feels fantastic once you lock in your build. There's more depth basically here than you may expect as well. There's even things like upgrades, branching dialogue, side content. The story is actually a real big focus. And yeah, it's even a massive roster of pilots and parts. So yeah, this one, well worth the time. And that's it for this one. 15 action RPGs on Switch that deserve way more attention than they've had. Some got buried by bigger releases, some were written off too quickly. A couple, the Switch 2 has improved things, and a few, well, they were indies, or even some didn't find their audience entirely. But every single one of these is worth your time for one reason or another. Now, if there is a hidden gem you love that I didn't mention, let me know in the comments. I always read them, and I'm constantly on the hunt for new stuff to check out. And if you do, again, like this kind of thing, overlooked games, deeper cuts, hidden gems, honest takes, feel free to hit subscribe. I've got plenty more videos like this coming soon, and it helps the channel a huge amount. All right, appreciate you watching. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers all.